Chapter 11, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Fast forwarding to 21st century, these are three countries that the United States fought wars with during the 20th century, or in the last 80 years or so. So they have that much in common, but they also have something else in common. Well, several things in common. Here's Korea on the map, Japan, Vietnam. They all were strongly influenced by this big, super big country right here, China. In fact, China tried to conquer all three of them. China conquered Korea and held it for a while, conquered Vietnam and at one point held it 1,000 years, but never was able to conquer Japan. They tried to several times. Kublai Khan tried to twice, lost both times. But they were able to conquer and hold for a time Korea and Vietnam. In the case of Japan, Japan consists of 4 islands, and I did write those names on the board. Surprising enough, when I've asked this question on a multiple choice test, it seems like hardly anybody misses it. It may be because some of the choices I give are ridiculous. Put down islands like Guam and Hawaii, and hopefully all of you know not to pick choices like that. But anyway, again, folks, I can't be sure this class will get this question, but nevertheless, I do want you to learn it. 4 Japanese islands, big islands, located fairly closely together. Japan is located on the top of volcanic mountains. And basically what happened was volcanoes began on the Pacific and shot upward. And their lava formed the island of Japan, just like Hawaii is located on volcanic mountains and several other Pacific islands are. And weirdly enough, today volcanoes are making news in Hawaii for one and Iceland for another. So they're still active, still around. Because Japan has a lot of volcanic ash, its soil is rich. However, only about 20% of the land is what you call arable. That word means capable of being farmed. Well, I just said less than a minute ago that Japan's soil is rich. Why can't they farm it? And that's because so much of the land is steep mountainside and rocky, and that makes farming very difficult. Japan has never been a land known for its heavy produce. Now, this might sound a little bit weird, but why would volcanic soil be rich? And folk, what it reminds me of is when we went to the moon, we brought back moon soil, and we tried to grow crops in moon soil with a little bit of water. The plants that we planted grew better on moon soil than they generally would on Earth. Why is that?
Less oxygen.
Say again?
I don't know. I'd say less oxygen. Maybe I don't know for sure.
Less oxygen on the moon. Well, when they grew the plants on Earth, they were grown in an Earth atmosphere with Earth water, but moon soil. The fact is, folks, I don't think anybody knows, except that the moon soil appears to be very, very rich, just like volcanic soil. Now, I'll say something I didn't say this morning's class, but some people believe that the ground on Earth, on the surface of the Earth, is under a curse, to where it won't produce as much of anyway. But that's theology more than it is history, but nevertheless, I'll throw it in. I mean, it is a fact that volcanic soil is highly productive. Moon soil proved to be highly productive. And Robert Heinlein wrote some books about farming on some of the moons of Jupiter and indicated that farming would be really excellent if we ever could go there and start a farm on Jupiter's moons. Maybe soon we'll start a farm on Earth's moon. and grow really, really highly productive crops. But by the way, we now know that the moon has water. So anyway, that remains to be seen. Japan is also located along some fault lines. Basically, a fault line is the line where two tectonic plates come together, and much too often these plates will move a little bit, and this leads Japan to have some very, very severe earthquakes. The last earthquake occurred a little bit more than 3.5 years ago, and it led to massive tidal waves overrunning the place, and of course numerous deaths. But the water from the tidal waves hit some nuclear reactors and has contaminated some of their soil that may be contaminated for many, many years. Nobody knows how many. But all through its history, in 1923, the city of Tokyo experienced a severe earthquake. So they've had problems with earthquakes. Nevertheless, the Japanese people are resilient. They will strike back. Japan has a temperate climate. By temperate climate, we mean they have a summer, they have a fall, they have a winter, and they have a spring. Much similar to the United States. Now, folks, somehow people who live in temperate climates are more industrious than people who live in tropical climates. And if you try to analyze why that is, one reason might be that people who live in temperate climates know they have a short window of opportunity to plant. And at harvest time, they have a short few days to harvest. They've got to get the planting done within a small window, like right here in Georgia. For most crops, the planting time is between April 20th and May 9th. We're talking about 19 or so days. If you plant after May 9th, the crops will not have time to ripen. Now, there are some exceptions. If you plant before April 20th, there's a good chance frost is going to get your crop and destroy it. So you have a small window of opportunity. And my sister living in Ohio told me the Ohio farmers were really scared a couple of years back because during the window of opportunity, the rain started falling and made the whole place a muddy mess, and the farmers could neither plow nor plant because the tractors, the ground was just too soft and too mushy and too muddy with a whole bunch of water puddles. And they were so scared that they wouldn't get to plant at all, but finally the soil dried up enough that you were able to get out and plow the soil, even though it was sunny, because they knew, hey, we have to plow right now because the window of opportunity is going to pass. So people who live in this part of the world have to be really careful that they go out and work when they have to. People in tropical climates can plant if they want to or not plant if they don't want to. But generally, they have not been as high achievers as people who live in more temperate climates. Like Great Britain, Japan is an island, and like Great Britain, it has been influenced by the mainland, but yet developed its own unique culture. Great Britain, the same thing can be said for them. They're an island, and they're influenced by the continent of Europe, yet they have their own unique culture. Japan is a lot the same way. The Japanese people believed that the universe was formed by the marriage of a god and a goddess. Now, this belief is common among primitive peoples, but Japan is the only supposedly advanced culture that holds this belief that is usually associated with primitive peoples. Their creation myth has survived till modern times. The earliest people we know of who've inhabited Japan are the Jomon. And the Jomon were believed to have lived by hunting and fishing and food gathering and arrived as long ago as 8,000 BCE. But today a lot of historians are saying no, from the very beginning they were farmers and they knew how to farm. And yes, while they hunted and while they fished, they also had some other ways of making a living. Finally, you have the Yayoi. It is now known too that the Yayoi are offshoots from the Jemon. So the Jemon are really the original Japanese people who came to the islands probably from China or from Korea. Now, if you talk to a person, a really devout Japanese person, he might tell you that at least the royal line of Japan, the emperor, came from heaven and is therefore divine. Modern historians seriously doubt this. Now, don't worry about the Nara period or the Heian period. I promise you they will not be on a test. However, I do want to point your attention to the word samurai. Yeah, right here, samurai, because I mean, you run into this from time to time, and when you see it in the newspaper, you hear it on TV. Essentially, the samurai were Japanese mounted warriors, mounted on horseback, similar to the European knight, with one big difference. European knights carried spears and shields, spear and buckler. The Japanese samurai used bows and arrows. And generally, he was not that heavily armored. But both the European knight and the Japanese knights were mounted warriors. Now, for the last 2,600 or so years, officially Japan has been ruled by emperors. However, most of your emperors, including the one who rules today, has almost no authority. Most of the time they've been mere figureheads. However, no one has ever assassinated an emperor so that he could himself become emperor. No one in Japan has ever overthrown an emperor. Basically, they have lived there in a palace, oftentimes in isolation from their own people, and claimed to be God. And a lot of the Japanese people have believed that in fact they are God. But for the most part, the Japanese have ruled themselves. Now they do date time from the accession year of an emperor. The present emperor took office in 1989, which means that this is year 25 for the, this is the year 25th year of the present Japanese emperor. His father ruled for some 50 years, got the throne as a young man. But they keep time from the emperor, just like the ancient peoples used to do. In the 3rd year of King such and such, or in the 5th year of King so and so. This was the ancient way of keeping time, and the Japanese still use it to this day. To give you some idea how isolated the emperor is, no Japanese emperor had ever appeared on television until the great earthquake in the spring of 2011. And finally, a Japanese emperor agreed to appear on television, appealing to his people for calm and promising his help in their rebuilding. But they were looked on as being too divine and too holy to appear on a medium like television. Their mindset.